over half a century ago, we reached the moon. We were able to look back on our planet as we're able to now look back on that moment and be inspired by the ingenuity of humans. The world order was set when Neil Armstrong's boot touched the ground, and the West had won the race to the moon. A victory only possible due to a political economy born in Edinburgh, Scotland. In this series, we take a look at your world, the economic order that governs it, and how that is under threat. We examine the relationship between countries and currencies, which explains much of man's inhumanity to man, and we look at what might be achieved if the wealth of nations was once more directed at achieving the impossible for the advancement of all mankind. To do that, we first need to look at where we are on the economic timeline and see what got us here. We will go as far back as 1000 BC to the invention of coins in Turkey and paper money in China. We'll talk about the discovery of the Americas and Adam Smith's framework for international trade, the birth of the dollar, the end of the Great Depression. We'll explain how the world order works, what it looks like, and what it'll look like in future. We begin not at the beginning, but here, on the precipice of change. New vectors have evolved through finance, technology, and the changing environment. Strategies based on the sanctions regime, credit control, systems of debt, or even the number of aircraft carriers are outdated, ineffective, and increasingly redundant. It's exactly this complacency of thought that is being exploited by disruptive systems of power.
We have been leapfrogged by others, by digital currency, by digital Chinese currency. Why? Because, frankly, our central bank has been slow.
Analysts have been warning of the dollar's impending doom.
I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I think I will use the word doomed in the long term.
An ideological war is being waged against your currency, your culture, and your system of government. It is often said that money rules the world. A slightly less pithy and more accurate statement might be, not money that rules the world, but the ability to control wealth. History has shown us that those who control trade lead the world in terms of power and progress. But history and progress are colliding. The future is being defined not by birth rates, brand habits, or nuclear capabilities, but instead it is being played out in efficiencies of government, and the US hegemony is being challenged with a new framework for international trade. China aims to be the world's leading superpower, but they currently rely on the US system of global trade in their quest for equivalence. They see an opportunity for a new global system which they control. To this end, they are waging a campaign on the world order that will cause conflict, crisis, and draw every country to choose a side. The framework for the current world order was developed in 1776 in Edinburgh, Scotland, by Adam Smith and published in a series of books often called The Wealth of Nations, that put forward the theory of political economy and led to his moniker as the father of capitalism. In 1945, these principles were used by the US and Harry Dexter White, a US Treasury official and Soviet informant, to establish the Bretton Woods Agreement, formation of the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, or GATT. Subsequent trade agreements were formed around a primary objective of international security and the US foreign policy. It was a capitalist framework for empire, access to globalization in return for stable markets. Via SWIFT and the sanctions regime, the US police and enforce their global trade and system of finance. Via the IMF and the World Bank, they control access to credit and the management of debt. In this, they lead the world, as Joe Biden terms it, by the power of example rather than the example of power. This world order has led to the longest period of peace, the biggest reduction in poverty, and the fastest increase in living standards since the beginning of civilization. Nobody has benefited more than the US, but the motivations for GATT have changed. Its core tenets of patents, financing, and sanctions are being undermined. Seemingly benevolent technology has evolved into weapons of market destruction, attacking the fundamental systems and institutions that bind our societies. The West's systems and stores of value are the new front in a war that's about to accelerate due to climate change, aging demographics, and technological vulnerabilities. As the ice melts, trade routes become more efficient, and new resources become available. But in other areas, the systems in place that deliver energy for industry or food and water for survival fall apart. Where demographics are skewed to the older generations, these economies rely on exports and their largest economic allies for consumption, who in return require deeper integration financially, culturally, and militarily. As the coastline changes with a rising tide, so too will borders as the cresting wave of Chinese expansion meets the sandy shores of American regulation. The shifting trends in global trade and security define a future of direct conflict between China and the US. As Sun Tzu put it, opportunities multiply as they are seized, and the Chinese have been carping those DMs since 1969. China has been on a confrontational trajectory with the US since the Communist Revolution, but the tipping point came with coronavirus. China's role in the manufacturing sector is being questioned. Production is moving out of China as a result of increasing labour costs, and the value in tariff-free zones with reduced shipping and capital risks.
Obviously, inflation concerns are one thing, but I have to wonder, given the disruptions that you're seeing in Shanghai and the rest of China, what is this latest survey that you've come out shown? What's changed?
The biggest challenge is for sure a slowing economy here in China, and doing business here is becoming more political.
This gradual decline is on the verge of becoming a flood. China is not yet by any measure equivalent of the US, and getting there is not simply a question of time. The growth necessary to avoid collapse relies on globalization to support an aging population, increasingly expensive workforce, and the coming carbon transition. But globalization is retreating. US foreign policy has shifted. Cornered by their own demographics, the Chinese have little choice. Engage further with a trade system that limits their potential and demands unabidable standards, leading to inevitable economic failure, or instead, by smarts and stealth, create a new global order directly challenging the most powerful nation on earth by deploying their digital currency as a function of trading relationships in such a way that allows for a parallel system of debt that will both increase the power of allied states while reducing global reliance on the US. This parallel system is designed not to complement, but instead destroy US structures of control. A world war that again will be won with cryptography, only this time the bullets and bombs will be stablecoins, tokens, and central bank currencies.